So we are taking a look at graphing on Google Sheets instead of hand graphing. So in our notes on page 238 and page 239, we went through the ideas of why we graph, things that should be on the graph when we complete it, and then we did an example hand graph in our notes. So what I'm going to do here is the data that was listed on page 239. I'm going to show you how to create that graph in Google Sheets. So what I did here is I titled my first column with axis A, and on the column A, x-axis, and according to the information in the notes, the variable temperature is the x-axis information. Now, the y-axis information from page 239 is volume with its units of milliliters. So the first thing I want to point out is that even though I have the word temperature here and you can see a little something in the cell, then if you take a look at volume, milliliters, you can see that it goes over. So sometimes when you're creating your graph and putting in your information, you need to adjust the width of the column. So the way that you do that is take your mouse and put it there so it's between the two columns. And there's a little arrow that shows up. Click on your mouse. And now I'm going to move it and see if I moved it enough. Oh, and move it a little bit more. So now I can see the full name of the variable temperature and the unit of degrees Celsius. I want all of the volume information, words, units, values, also to fit in the column. So now I'm going to readjust the B column, same way, put it between the B and C, and then I'm just going to pull it until I see it's all fit. So now my information is fitting in the columns. Next thing, if you need to print out the data table, it should be really neat and readable. And if you notice with this one, the words like temperature and volume, they are aligned to the left of the cells, but their values that were measured in the lab are aligned to the right on the opposite sides. That makes it really hard to look at and process the information. So make sure you align all the information in your data tables so it's super nice and neat and easy to read. So I'm going to start with the x-axis cell. So I'm going to click on the x-axis. I'm still pressing the mouse. I'm going to drag it over to Y and then straight down. So I did not lift up my mouse, and you see how all of those cells are highlighted in a light blue color. I'm going to lift up the mouse, and then I'm going to find my icon. So when you look here at your icon area, moving across, you'll find this icon right here, and you'll see the word align. So what I want to do is have everything that's highlighted aligned in the same position, and I'm going to make it center. So now all the information in those columns is aligned, a lot easier to read and compare. Because it's a data table, having borders makes it even easier to read. So up here, back in your icon row, you will see there's this icon, looks like a box, and when you put your mouse on it, it says borders. Click on it, and the type of border we want is all the borders, all the outside borders and the inside of the cells. So when I click on that, you can see the darkened lines show up, and if I click on a cell to take the highlight off of the blue, take a look at that. That is really easy to read for the eyes, and that's really important when you're trying to convey information, is that it should be easy on the eyes to read. Now let's make the actual graph. So highlighting. So the first thing I want to point out in making your data table on sheets, we put our variable name and unit at the top of the column, and then underneath it, the cells going down, is where we put our measurements. And notice, these are numbers only. There's no letters in here. That's very important for the graph. Same thing at the top. The heading here is volume in milliliters, so it's understood every value listed below is milliliters. And notice in these volume measurements, it's only the numbers down below. If you put letters where we have the measurements, it will not graph correctly. You'll get some weird stuff. So I'm going to click on my first value, 21, for the temperature. And then I'm going to keep holding the mouse, not lifting it up, move over to its corresponding Y coordinate of 3. And then I'm going to just drag down to my last data value of 37. Now I'm going to lift up my mouse. So I only have highlighted the measurement numbers. To make the graph, go up to your tabs. So File, Edit, View, choose Insert, and then scroll down Insert and find Chart. So I click on Chart, and Sheets is going to throw some sort of graph up here. So I'm just grabbing the chart, the graph, and just moving it so I can see my data table. Now, in chemistry, we will typically only do the scatter chart. When you insert your chart, this whole window over to the right should open up called Chart Editor. If Chart Editor is not open for you, that's okay. Click on your graph. These 3 little buttons here will pop up. Click on those, and then you can find your Chart Editor. So the first thing I need you to do is be in the setup and double check that this is a scatter chart. So there are other types of charts. I don't know what the default is, but if your graph didn't look like mine and it looks something like this, it's because it's the wrong type of chart. So click on, make sure in setup, chart type, and make sure it says the scatter. There we go. So we want it to say scatter chart. Okay. Now, take a look at our chart as it's showing here, the scatter plot, okay? Notice we did not highlight the heading, temperature degrees Celsius, but the way the software is programmed is that it understood that that was the variable in unit, so it put that, already labeled the x-axis for us. And same thing, the header for what we wanted for our Y information, our Y series, is volume milliliters. So it put that already in for us. However, it gave us that very generic type of title that we don't use at our level. So we're going to put in the graph title that I showed you in the notes, our model title. So remember, this data in our notes was for 50 grams of carbon dioxide that was being heated. So here we go. So as the temperature of the CO2 gas increases, right? We named the variable, what the general trend of it that happened in the lab, and the substance that whose temperature was changing. The volume, the y-axis information, the volume occupied also increased. Boom. So now I'm done with it. I'm going to click out of it, just away from there, and look, it fits it in there really nice. The other thing I'm going to tell you is if you are going to print this out in my classroom, so it's like a text box where the temperature, or where we put the title. If you're going to print it out in my classroom and not at home, so just curse way over, and then just in parentheses at the end, put your last name. So when they print out, we know who it belongs to. Okay. So once when you create your data table, and if you know how to highlight and insert the chart and it's a scatter plot, the chart is like 95% done for you. Okay. Couple of other things that we need to do. So here we go. So I'm going to click back on the edit chart. This is the setup. Now we're going to go to customize. Okay. So in customize, you have chart and axis titles. So you could type those over here. You could change the font if you wanted. Okay. Series is refers to the y-axis information. So you can choose the color of the data point, but we print in gray scale. Okay, the fill color, if you want a circle or if you want your data points to be triangles. Okay, we traditionally build off of the left axis, right? Not the right axis. Okay, but the big thing that we need to do here is the trend line. So this is our general trend line. So we click on the trend line, see it shows up. Okay, and what we also need to do, remember, when we have a directly proportional line, it's a y equals mx plus b. So we want to do that label. So go down to your label and choose equation. And for this particular data set, the blue data set, y, the blue dot represents y, because that's our series here, equals 0.88, so that's our m value, times an x plus a negative 20. There are other things as we do more things with graphing that we can play around with. So for this particular graph, this would be a finished product. So at this point, I would ask you to print it out and turn it in with your hand graph and pink data sheet. So if you go up to print, okay, a couple of things here. Make sure that the print orientation is landscape, so we get this all on one paper. And notice we have these empty cells in the background and they kind of busy the sheet up, okay? So you can go down here to formatting, and with the formatting, uncheck the show grid lines and watch how it cleans up the background. Look at that. So now it shows your nice and neat data table, and it shows your graph, and it gets rid of the busyness, and then you are able to print it out in the classroom. So I can help you with that. So now you're going to do this same type of Excel sheet with your spaghetti graph information, your mass and length data.